Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Doing great, thank you.
You got some soft buzz coming from somewhere in your studio.
Did that help?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. Yeah, that's just a 60 cycle hum coming from that keyboard right there on my left.
Ah, nice. I see you got quite a few keyboards in your studio.
Yeah, I'm a little bit of a collector, I guess. So part of it's kind of a fun, but maybe not always the best problem to have. I don't know.
I mean, there's some composers that literally have warehouses full of random instruments, so
Mhm.
it's not uncommon. Do you have a favorite that you like to use?
That's a good question. I'd say actually this one I've had not the longest, but I've had it quite a while, and I probably have the most memories with that because I used to play live a lot more, and I played live with that quite a bit. So I don't know, maybe that's my favorite, the old Wurlitzer.
Do you hope to get back into playing live anytime?
Um, it's funny. I would like to. I kind of went on a very intentional hiatus from that well before the pandemic, but I love doing it. But I think the thing I got so focused on composing that I felt like I kind of had to choose that as my main focus, and when so that's kind of where I ended up.
Yeah.
But it's fun.
Well, as the world opens up, maybe you'll find some more opportunities.
Yeah, for sure.
So, as I understand, your new series is gonna come out tomorrow. How do you feel about it?
I feel really good. It's funny. I don't. There's some typo that happened. It's not a series. It's actually a movie.
Oh, I must have gotten the email wrong. I thought it was a series. That's even more exciting.
Yeah, it's no. Somehow on the promo art they have listed new series, and a couple of things have
Okay,
mentioned, but it's just a movie. I mean, maybe there will be another movie, but for now, there's just one.
nice,
Uh,
nice.
yeah, I'm very excited. Yeah, it was a fun journey to be on. It was, got to write a ton of music and explore some fun directions with it, and it's just kind of a wild thing. We did it all during COVID, pretty much. So I don't know. It worked out. It's kind of wild.
Well, one thing I was really surprised about when your publicist sent me those behind the scenes videos was you guys actually got to have the orchestra in person for like a few recordings. And at least from the fancy camera tricks, it looked like you had a pretty big number of people there. Is that what you
Yeah.
guys thought was going to happen for the score, or were you anticipating having to have your musicians in separate locations?
Well, yeah, it's a great question. One thing that was from the outset, the goal was to record live orchestra, and so sometimes people record it in smaller groups. Originally, I had planned to be at the recording session. Those were actually in Budapest, so there was no way for me to travel there during this time. But they were just seeming to be able in a situation where they were comfortable recording with the whole group, and we're kind of monitoring it all along. We did it at the very beginning of November, so it worked out, and that was lucky. I know a lot of productions that happened in California. There have been some sessions. They took a while to come back. They're back a lot more now, but I think people were, sometimes it was a thing where everybody was recording by themselves in their own space, and somebody was magically getting it all to come together. But this was a little, all the band, well, all of the orchestra all live together. Anyways, other things were recorded separately or done by me or different, depending on the cue, different ways that we solved it. But that was something that luckily from the outset that was the goal, and I was monitoring all along, saying, are we going to have to change the plans? But we kept talking with the folks in Budapest, and it was fine, so it worked out.
How did you feel about not being able to be there, like before and after the fact? Do you feel like you'd be more comfortable just monitoring it in the future?
It worked so well. It was kind of amazing to me. I was a little nervous going in, how well that would work, but it was great. I don't think it's as magical as being there, but there's either being in the room or just being in the studio, you can kind of feel the energy of the whole session. So I certainly will always look to do that when possible. But some projects, maybe it's not practical to fly halfway around the world to do it, or in this case, both that, but plus COVID. It worked out that it was great. They have a really I'm trying to remember what service they use. Probably Source Connect, I believe. And they gave us like a high quality signal from the orchestra, so we could hear them really well. It was a mix coming from their mix room, and we could talk to the engineer and the conductor. And everyone, they were super quick there, and we could quickly have a back and forth about any things we wanted to figure out. So it was great.
Awesome. That is so great to hear. I honestly think that it's a lot easier to have a cohesive collaborative project when you, at least even if it's remotely, get to work with the other person. I had a friend who's a cellist and she was like, well, we can't all perform together, so I guess I'm just recording these 30 cello cues by myself.
Oh wow, right, yeah. That have you been doing some like recording lately, or in that way, or do you record too as well? You're a composer as well, right? Oh, cool.
Yeah, so last semester I recorded a few things for some of my composer colleagues. I haven't composed anything for clarinet myself this academic year. And then all of our ensembles, if we had anything recorded, we had to just do that at our house. So I invested in a sound shield and a good mic, and that's what I've been doing. It's been interesting. Some people I have learned are not as accustomed to playing with the click track as composers get to be earlier, I feel.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I think that's actually though can be an issue with some great orchestras. Even though the folks in Budapest were great on that front, they played very well to click. But I think even for a great orchestra, sometimes if especially if they're playing a lot of classic repertoire, maybe it stretches more and it's more about playing together than playing to the click. So I think sometimes it's a different process. I think to get everybody. We didn't do anything off click, but I would like to do that some point in the future with the orchestra too, because that can be the flip side of it. Is that if it's not the kind of cue that needs to catch moments too tightly, it can be pretty neat. I haven't ever done it for a project, but I've done some workshops a long time ago where we did work on cues off click, and it was a lot of fun to just see the difference sometimes, how much it could be more expressive away from the click if it made sense to do it that way.
Yeah. Well, one thing I was so immersed in when I was watching your behind the scenes videos was I felt, oh my gosh, I don't even feel like I need to watch the movie in order to like be immersed in a moment. It felt like a tone poem where you just have the orchestra telling the story. Was that your intention? Because that's kind of what it felt like to me.
Thank you. That's a really cool thing to hear. I can't say that it was my intention, other than I guess with film music so often, that's kind of part of the job. Not, I think you could think of places where it's not exactly that, but examples. But if you think of Star Wars as an easy example, or anything pretty much John Williams canon, that you kind of have a sense of the feeling of what's going on from the music, because you're trying in some way capture the grandeur of what's happening, or the romance, or the in my case I was trying to combine some other things, but as been mentioned a few times, it's got a lot of spy elements to the movie, and also some fairy tale qualities. So playing with those. So that, I guess I was just thinking about telling the story, really. And so if that comes across away from picture, that's even better, you know. I guess that would be my ideal, that it works for the movie, and then hopefully people can enjoy it on its own too.
Hmm. It definitely reminded me of the kind of music that band directors, orchestral directors, where it's like we want to integrate some more popular music into our concert, but we can't, have it live to film. What's the kind of thing that we would look at? And your score, from what I heard of it, was exactly that kind of thing.
Oh, so cool! Thank you. Hopefully that would be fun. I'm curious. Maybe I would be curious what it evoked for you. Just as maybe just if I can ask you that question.
Yeah. So from the behind the scenes videos that I watched, I immediately felt this sort of combined aspect of suspense of like, oh, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? I know there's some kind of anticipation here. And then a sort of magic to it, especially in your areas where you have your buildup and then the release that goes into a soaring melody or fanfare. And it was like, I know something magical just happened there. In my mind, like I see the brighter colors. I'm like, yes, that's awesome.
Oh, that's so cool! Wow, that's great. Well, I'm glad that that comes across from it. You know, you got me thinking about when you mentioned tone poems, and it's an interesting thing because in classical music, there's sometimes a big back and forth between music that is absolute music versus obviously evoking something dramatic. If I'm getting my definitions clear, it's been a while, but I think for me, a little bit of a tangent, you know, a piece that's been very important for me, which I think falls into the category of tone poem, would be Prelude to the Afternoon of the Faun by CwC. And you know,
Yes.
it's so good, and a big influence on me just from the feelings it creates. And CwC in general is one of my favorite composers of all time. I think just his kind of the way the layers of emotions he creates, and you know, I have heard a number of great lectures on that piece and listened to the piece many times and studied it some. And anyways, I love what he does with that, and I think that is such a obviously an iconic piece in the lineage of classical music. I don't know. I just think of that as a great example for me of it, without trying to go into any analysis of it now, but just of evoking kind of what it's called and where it comes from. So.
That is so cool. So some music, when you listen to it away from the film, you can sometimes tell they were writing this to picture, or have a good guess of if they were writing it to picture. But as I said before, your music holds up so well on its own. It's not one of those things where I think, oh, he was clearly writing to picture. So I've got to ask, with this kind of score, how do you like to go about your process of writing for it?
Yeah, great question. You know, I think these cues that you heard in particular were ones that were moments where I think the music was allowed to soar a little bit more in the movie. You know, there's some really beautiful visuals that go along with these scenes, and they're a very direct part of the storytelling as opposed to more of like a little more of taking a little more of the lead at times, especially when the big melodies come in. You know.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in that way it was nice to think about giving him a little space to just be music a little bit in that context. And I mean, it does get me to a larger question of it. And I think in this movie in particular, working with the filmmakers, working with Alexei, the director, and Vladimir, the producer, that everybody wanted to have strong themes that would kind of could develop and go through the movie. So early on, we had a back and forth where I actually just sent them piano versions of the themes, and so that was kind of really nice because that's not as common necessarily. A lot of times you think that every idea you have has to be polished to within an inch of its life before directors can be able to say that's good. Nah. So this was nice because I could just focus on writing melodies that I felt right to me, and then when I had, we had a good number of them, but after a while, I could kind of see, that we're gravitating this way or that way, and so we had a nice back and forth just developing these themes. And for me, it was nice to try to have something that could be like a little sections of the melody could come in at times, because you're not going to state the full phrase necessarily every time. But then also, hopefully, if there were an occasion in the movie or two, you could get the full phrase of the melody to play out. So that was kind of a fun thing. And I think the cues those 3 cues are all places where there's a chance for the melodies to play pretty much their full length. At least, yeah, I think so. So I guess it was just kind of a lucky moment that worked out to have a feature for that, because not all movies would that even be the right choice for. So, but it was good here.
With all that information that you were creating, I noticed in the credits that there's also an orchestrator. How much back and forth is there between you and the orchestrator with how much information you give them and then possible edits? Because I feel like every composer has a different approach to how they work with an orchestrator.
Sure. Yeah. Well, with Nicole Brady's a good friend and just a talent in her own right. But we've known each other for a while and have done some other things together. And so when this came about, it was just a really easy choice just to work together on this. And then also Tomas helped out as well, who's another friend of mine. But so that process is they were really great, and it could have gone different ways. I think with an orchestrator, it can go anything from, like, you could send them a simple piano version, and then they could take it all the way to orchestra. It was more, in this case, I would give pretty detailed MIDI sketches basically to them, my process would be, I would compose the piece and do a lot of arranging just on my computer, because ultimately there's a lot of production that I do either recording myself or recording synths or sounds in my computer and send those to the filmmakers. And once we get to a spot where everyone's feeling good about it, and before we record, then it has to get ready for the orchestra. So in my case, I would say it would be fairly detailed sketches. I usually would have in mind what I wanted the violin 1 and 2 and violas and cello and bass to play, and oftentimes some voicings for the brass and for the woodwind. But then also there'd be times where I'd ask, hey, would you have any ideas how to fill out this section, or some colors? Or sometimes she'd just say, hey, we've got all this. What if we did change this up a little bit? So it could be a nice back and forth, I think. And, when you work with somebody that they have so much to bring to the table, I'm always a big fan of letting them bring that and, let them shine a little bit too, because I know that they're going to have good ideas too. So I would just say overall, also because of speed, sometimes I had to work that way more, but when we have a chance to, it's always nice to have a back and forth. And, they would take my MIDI and turn it into the sheet music, and then we send that all to Budapest and they record it. So pretty amazing.
In this particular project, did you have a favorite moment of collaboration when you're like, yes, this is just going so well?
I think there's so much, even though I felt going into the recording session, I felt confident, there's still this feeling like, what if we just totally forgot about something and overlooked it, and it's just not going to happen and not going to work. But luckily, it all came together. And so I guess really, as much as I always will have nerves going into a recording session, it was just really satisfying to do it and feel like, oh, hey, this worked. We're good. We're in good shape. We got what we needed to get out of those sessions. And then, then it's on to the next thing of the mix. But that would be the highlight for sure. On any project that you get to record orchestra, that's kind of like, what's like the big, I mean, I guess getting the final mixes is also very big, but in terms of just like the musical process, that's just like the moment where you feel like you're the most in it. It's like all about the music for a little while. So that's fun.
And then this is one of my favorite questions to always ask during interviews. What was your favorite cue to score? And what do you feel was the most difficult cue to score for this film?
Um, is it okay if it's the same cue?
Absolutely.
Well, so the one that's called Secret Magic Control Agency. I think that I'm not sure if the titles were on there on the ones you got, but it's the one. It's that melody. That one, it just took a lot of back and forth because the timing of that scene was really specific, and the film, that was a scene that was pretty much locked from the beginning. So I had to really follow their timing there, but then I also had to make sure it had its own like sense of natural logic. I think it's kind of like you have to color within these walls, but it also has to sound like you're not being hemmed in by those walls. And I felt like, we probably did the most versions of that cue of any, with different melodies early on, and that melody was settled on at some point, but then there was just different versions of like ways to just get it a little peppier or change moods just a little bit at the right time. And kind of funny enough, the one that says here, looking at you, not kid, here's looking at you, not kid. That one was actually also one of the most satisfying, but one of the easiest to do. It's kind of like, I feel like that happens for me a lot. Sometimes there's cues you just have, or, even away from scoring, like just writing music, there's pieces of music that you just hammer and hammer and hammer on, and eventually you get to somewhere you're like very satisfied with. And then there's those magic ones where it's just like, it just kind of happens pretty quickly, and you polish it up, but it just feels like it almost arrives in its full form right away. I mean, that's like a gift when that happens. But
yes, that's always so satisfying during the sketching process. You're like, I'm not really sure where I'm going to go with this, but I'm going to play around, see if I find something. You're like, wait, yes, that one, that was it. Yes, keep that.
Yeah. I always relish that, because when it happens, you're like, okay, thank you. And then you think, next time, will that happen again? No guarantees ever.
So this is something that, especially in music school, I've had lots of different professors. Everyone has a different approach to it, especially when teaching it. What do you think is the key to creating a good melody?
Oh, wow. Yes, that's a fantastic question. I think, and this is a philosophy that, I've studied a lot of different places. So at one point I studied with this, I went to this program in Paris, which you might look and check out if you're in any interest. It's called EMA, EAMA. It's the European American Musical Alliance, and it's led by this great teacher named Philip Lasser, and there's a bunch of great folks who go there. But it's sort of taught in the tradition of Nadia Boulanger. But he has a lot of great thoughts about melody and that's kind of, and counterpoint, and I feel like that's his specialty, and he's amazing. But so I just mentioned that to say, because he always talked about finding an elegant line, and one of the things that he would say in that, and I feel like I try to remember this, though sometimes you just get caught up in what you're doing, so you can't, but you always have, like a good melody will almost always have a single apex and possibly a single lopex. So just that it might have an elegant, simple line. You might do a lot of fancy things around that, but just like in terms of what you remember, it's just that simple. So, I think composers in the film, CwC would be easy enough to find a lot of great examples. Bach. In the film context, I feel like Alexander Desplat has that too. His melodies can seem almost super straightforward at times, but they're always so elegant, and it's just almost, you can sing it. They're very singable. And another, I don't have to riff on this too much, but another thing that was mentioned there that I kind of believe a lot of melodies have a lot of um, half steps and whole steps, or it's scalar, the main part of the melody, and maybe you have some good leaps. I mean, that's kind of thing we all think about, how do you balance leaps with scalar motion? But our ear connects to that scalar motion very naturally.
Yes.
I don't know. There's some. That's like a real quick answer, but we could dig as far into it as you want, as far as my 2 cents on it.
You're all good. Your last part, especially about scalar motion, just in my head reminded me I have a contextual listening test tomorrow.
Oh no. That's always fun. Man, tests. I think I guess I get my real world. Well, not to say school's not real world, but there's the same anxiety as what I'm trying to say. Even after school of the test, sometimes you just don't know you're having a test. I remember doing all of that kind of stuff very much. Well, I wish you the best of luck with that. I don't know. It sounds like I bet you do great with it.
Thank you.
My daughter has a really good ear, but she's 10, and she'll pick up melodies really quick that she hears, or she also writes some melodies a lot herself. She likes to write songs, but she's super averse to me trying to explain to her what the chords are doing underneath it. And she's like, I don't care, Dad. I just want to sing it. Okay. So it can go both ways.
That's how I feel with my younger cousin, except she's in high school and wants to go into musical theater.
Oh, okay. Well, if she wants to go into musical theater and has a great ear for that kind of stuff, she's probably on her way. That's really great.
Do you like composing with your daughter?
Yeah, I do. It's super fun. We have had some fun chances. She likes to write her own songs, and so she does play enough piano that she can play some chords, and she'll do it that way. But lately, she comes up with melodies and lyrics, and then comes to me, and then I'll find some chords for her underneath it, and sometimes we do an arrangement. She did one for her school talent show that
cool.
She did a great job. So, it's nice. Of course, as a parent, I'm super biased and think she's awesome.
Hey, I mean, if she can write lyrics, brava from me. Writing lyrics is tough.
I know. She didn't get that from me. She must have gotten it from her mom, who's I'm not the lyric writer in the family.
Well, that is all of the questions I have for you. Do you have any final thoughts?
Not off the top of my head. I mean, it's very enjoyable to talk with you about it all, and I'm really glad that you took the time to come up with such interesting questions. Really, it got me thinking about tone poems, and I got to admit, it's just like, I had to think about it for a second. Remember okay, there we go. But it got it back in. It did. It's just part of my brain hadn't been thinking of it in that context in a long time. But it's just interesting. It's an interesting question to think in film music in particular. I think that you could almost, in a lot of, as I was saying before, a lot of situations, that's almost the job, is that you could write a piece of music that away from picture might could in some way tell the story, or at least give the listener a sense of like what might be happening.
Well, absolutely. It was so much fun getting to talk to you, Gabe. Have a great rest of your day.
It was great talking with you as well. Thanks so much, and hopefully you enjoy the film when you get the chance to see it, and hopefully we get to talk again sometime.
Hi guys, thank you so much for joining me for season 2, episode 2 of Chatting with Creators. It was so much fun getting to talk with Gabe about his project, Secret Magic Control Agency, his awesome approach to a melody, and just the fun of composing with his daughter and looking into a film score composer's classical training. It was such a great conversation, and I'm really glad I get to share this with you. Please know that moving forward, the rest of season 2 is going to be uploaded weekly on Tuesdays, and next week I will be interviewing Andy Bean about his work on Kid Cosmic. In the meantime, please be sure to also tune in on April 18th to the Glencorp School of Music page for the world premiere of my piece, Stars Beyond Turmoil, a piece for set electronics and bass pans and hand pan. Hope to see you there. Have a great rest of your day.